All right, it is 1 o'clock here in Bangkok. I think we'll go ahead and get started, and maybe we get to the administrivia and save time for substantive work. My name is Martin Duke. I am the new working group chair, and I'm so new that I'm not even on the slide. So my co-chairs are Martin and Gory. Gory should be here in a moment. And he is, of course, going to become the WIT area director on Wednesday. So he will not continue as chair. Martin, I believe, is also transitioning out, but he will remain chair through Bangkok. And I believe that Gory, in his capacity as area director, will name a second chair to join me going forward. Right away, I'm having trouble. There we go. Okay. This is the note well, even though it's not labeled as such. This talks about the intellectual property implications of you being here, as well as the code of conduct. It is Monday, many of you maybe are in your first session. If you're new to IETF or you've been a couple times and never actually bothered to look at the stuff, I strongly encourage you to take a look. It is quite relevant for basically legal reasons. And the upshot of the code of conduct is, just be professional and not like you're on Twitter.
And basically everything you say here, you have to say publicly because this is a public meeting. So if you say it now, then it is public.
And this meeting is in fact being recorded. So there's that. And the TLDR of that note well is any material that is presented here that you feel there's an intellectual property claim on that you are aware of, that certainly that you're a party to, you're required to disclose it or not participate in the discussion. Okay, we need a note taker. Magnus has graciously agreed to be the primary scribe, but he is presenting and one person is often not sufficient. So we do need a backup scribe, and this is the part where we stop the meeting until somebody volunteers. Greg, thank you very much, sir. Okay, we now have two scribes, so we can continue. As the slide says, we always need reviewers for working group drafts. TSVWG is a very diverse set of interests represented, but try to do the community a solid and read some things maybe a little bit outside of your area, because a lot of things are niche and need some more eyes. Furthermore, if you want a draft to kind of appear on the radar of this working group, it very much helps to have TSVWG be the second code word in the name of the draft, and it comes right, it actually will show up on the working group webpage as a individual draft. So that's always a good tactic. Okay. If you have not already, there are QR codes scattered about the room. Please scan that with your personal device, and that will register you as a member so that we know you were here, and that will also enable you to do things like participate in a comment queue, view slides, etc. If you are remote, please turn your audio and video off unless you are presenting or asking a question. Gory, do you want to update the community here?
Yeah.
I've already talked about the new chairs.
Thank you. Thank you for arriving here promptly and introducing yourself. Well, I'm Gory, and this is Martin. We're the other current co-chairs. More about that later. These are the drafts. TSVWG has not published any RFCs. Oh, we have no drafts in the RFC editor queue when we made this slide, but UDP options is being passed on as approved, and DPLP MTUD is in a queue for AD consideration. So hopefully shortly we'll also join it. And multipath DCCP is one step further behind that. So we've moved on a little bit since here. We are trying to publish things, and we're actually doing quite well as a working group. So please continue to comment and review for us. That really helps. NQB and careful resume and user EXP are beyond last call. I'm responsible for NQB, and that's with our AD. And our current AD, or his successor, which will be me, will make sure that this then progresses to the IESG. We don't see anything more than the AD review needed at this stage. After that, we'll expect a revision, and then the document will proceed. Zahid.
Okay, you can hear me? Yes.
Shout.
Eat the mic. Yeah, now you can hear me. So the NQB, I'm going to send some comments today, perhaps if I can make it, or like early tomorrow. I think this is good, but I already talked to it, like what my concerns are. One of the things that is sticking out a bit, like where this document basically says we are going to, like other SDO is going to do with normative text, and I'm a bit uncomfortable with that. Others then it looks fine to me. There's some editorial things need to be done. The concern I have is like when we are saying the other SDOs actually should do something or recommend something or must do something, we need to talk with them. So the question I have basically the working group, whether we have done that. If we have not done that, maybe you should send some LS or something, or like some concerns about that one. That's the only thing I have standing on this document.
Greg would be the person to comment, but he may prefer to comment now or via email later. It's up to you, Greg.
Guess I'll comment now. Greg White, Cable Labs. I think probably the simplest way forward on that is just to change the language from normative to informative and provide guidance to other SDOs as opposed to strongly worded recommendations.
Yeah, I think that's what we talked about, you and me. I think that's the way forward. Let's do that. But I'll put it on the text. Like, I mean, I'm writing the email to the mailing list. That's what I'm doing.
Actually, and one more point on that, I think it would be valuable also to do some kind of a liaison statement with to those other SDOs, because I think this is an important functionality that we would like them to be aware of and consider whether they want to adopt support for it. So.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that I'm going to recommend, like send LS. And I'm already, for 3GPP part, I already talked to Charles, like he should be looking at it. And he also thinks like, okay, if that is the case, we want to do these things, I think we should send an LS.
Okay. Sounds good.
I guess the brief summary of that is we'll do the right thing and make sure people know what that is. So on user EXP, David is the document shepherd, and I believe that's waiting his review after working group last call to try and publish that. And Martin's the shepherd for careful resume. Martin.
Yes, and we had a working group last call that was supposed to conclude at the beginning of February, which I totally forgot. Sorry for that. I just finished it earlier today. The authors have already addressed a lot of the comments that came up in working group last call. Thank you for that. And there was a new draft version submitted before this meeting. There were also some comments that happened after that version was published, and I assume that you are going to incorporate those as well.
Taking my chair hat off, just as a pure editor, I think we believe that the current draft includes all comments, the latest one, and it also includes a split out of the QLog stuff, which I'd like to talk about later. So I think this includes all current things, but it's for the shepherd to check that he's happy.
And I will do that.
I think I already addressed this, but In general, like we are asking you to go outside your comfort zone and like read something that maybe is not the niche that you are particularly into. In particular, these two drafts here are ones where last call is probably coming soonish. So you know, it's a good opportunity to take a look and see if you can live with what's in those documents.
Yeah, this is a list of stuff that you might want to read. It's not what this working group is doing, but they're all things that mention things that this working group is interested in. So please feel free to look at these, and you can make comments and discuss these on the TSVWG list, but please make sure you comment to the draft authors as well. We're just trying to make sure that people don't miss things happening in other places, and there'll be short heads-up talks on some of these. So if you look at them before the next meeting, you will actually have a chance to comment to the people who are presenting. I'll do milestones. We did some milestones. Yeah, done. Next. That's it. Next slide. Oh, this is the ones we haven't done. Okay, so we're working on the orange stuff and hope to see that done soon. So we would like to change those milestone dates to done. We have some red stuff that relates to DTLS and SCTP. So we will be talking about that. And after the talks, we'd like to have suggestions of new milestones to actually achieve, because we have slipped on these particular milestones. L4S Ops is nearly finished, so I've marked it blue because it's going to appear soon out. So that's good for a milestone. And we have in the future to submit UDP sockets for ECN, and that might even be done ahead of time if we do well. So currently we seem to be managing milestones reasonably well, and I appreciate people just keeping track and telling us when things are delayed. That's the milestones discussion. Next slide. Oh, agenda. Okay. I'll carry on talking. Do you want to talk? I don't mind. This is the agenda for session 1. We are through part 1, and we are presenting here the other things we expect to do in this session. If you see something that we have not included or you think should be included, please let us know now as we bash this agenda. We will talk about a set of transports drafts. No, keep on that page. Sorry. That one, yep. We will talk about the differentiated services L4S set of things, and we'll start the discussion on SCTP encryption with the aim of getting some conclusion to some of the topics which we've been knowing have been bubbling along in the background, which now need to converge in some way. So this is the agenda for session 1.
Corey?
Yes.
I think this is not in tune with the online agenda. So I said we don't need the time slot for SCP auth, just have the discussion for...
The report on SCTP auth is being given right now by this man appearing online, and it consists of not much work was done on this particular draft at this moment, so he's relinquished the slot to allow more talk on the DTLS protection part. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Agenda bashed. Next slide. Yep. The next slide shows the agenda for session 2. These are in red, not because they are in any way suspicious. They're in red because it's new presentations coming to this group, which you may have not seen before. So do have a look at these ahead of time. They're all going to be very short presentations. If you're speaking, please keep well within the time so that people can comment and discuss with you. They intend to bring topics here that might in future mature and become things. We're going to precede that with a recap of the SCTP discussion, and that is important to try and make sure we do make progress that we can. And so if that goes on longer, then some of these are at risk of not being presented this time. I'll apologize in advance. That's the agenda. Is anybody, any comments on the agenda? I guess I have to do this one as well, which is there's a new liaison statement. I wasn't expecting this, but this is really good news because we got a liaison statement from the Broadband Forum. It is a liaison saying they are going to do work on L4S, that they are going to tell us about it, which they have done, and that they would invite feedback on what they are doing and answers to questions that they may have. This is the really sort of useful liaison which allows things to be deployed. So I'm now telling the working group this exists. Go to this URL and you'll see how helpful these people were. So heads up, new liaison statement. Oh, question.
Yeah, Xian Song from ZTE, the BBF liaison officer. This liaison is sent last Friday because it was approved at last Friday, and the BBF spring meeting ended, last week. And BBF sent this liaison is to notify IETF that we started a new work on the L4S. And the scope for this project is mainly to find the use cases in broadband networks, and we would like to extract functional requirements to the broadband network elements based on the use case analysis. Yeah, so we anticipate the BBF will make some reference of IETF existing L4S outputs. So we look forward good collaboration with IETF. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for that update. And if you have more updates, then let the chairs know and we'll happily try and make good work from this. Zahid?
Yeah, for you, I mean, you, when as a liaison, you ask for a reply from us. Is it necessary? Now like we know about it. Is it okay, or like do you want us to send a email reply to you? Okay, I'll do that.
Zahid, we didn't hear the answer. I'm sorry.
The answer is like it's needed for a kind of like for the record of it. So I'll reply to that exactly what you said, Gori. Like this is good work. We're happy to give our input with expertise of L4S. Yeah.
Thank you. Is that the end? Okay, and here starts the meeting.
In my original individual capacity, I'm first on the agenda. I have two presentations which are related to each other. The first one is the update on the UDP ECN draft. Next slide. I think you have to press down arrow, maybe. All right, well, just the TLD, I'm going to run through the refresher really quickly. Bottom line is I recently, somewhat recently implemented ECN for Chrome, which involves touching most of your common platforms because of course Chrome runs in a number of places. It was an unpleasant experience. I decided to write about it and document the difference between different platforms and their socket APIs. And that's now written as a draft. We've decided to adopt it, and it's pretty much done. We've dealt with most of the issues. There are two things remaining, and I'm way ahead of the slides now.
Not current deck.
Okay.
A no current deck error.
Oh, that's a problem. Okay, well, that's fine. The slides aren't that great. The slides, which I think you can find on Data Tracker, if Data Tracker hasn't eaten them, are just basically have a table that summarizes the TLDR of the draft. I don't really want to talk about that table right now. Basically, there are 2.5 issues out there. One is there's an issue in GitHub that we should talk about the size of the argument in the C message that is reported back and forth. Whether in some platforms it's 1 byte, one platform it's 4 bytes. It's a little bit messy. I don't know that anyone's agreeing to like actually do the experiments to verify it for all these different platforms. And I sort of made the argument that you could just use cmessage next header and not have to deal with it. That conversation is ongoing. Martin, this is between the Martins, and we'll probably talk about it offline. If anyone has any like input on that question, you can comment on the GitHub, or you can comment now. Second issue is there was some desire to have some language about Apple Network Framework. That I don't consider that to be essential to this document. I've not seen any input from Apple or anyone else on what text would go in there. So, you know, I'm willing to wait, but not too long. And then the half issue is that I think we've had really good reviews from some BSD folks, from some Microsoft folks. I really like somebody from Apple to at least read the document and make sure I'm not telling any lies. And really, I think those three things. So I'm guessing that the two actual formal issues in GitHub will get resolved soon, even if it's just a matter of deciding not to do those things, which is, I think, the most likely outcome. However, I would really like somebody from Apple to read this. We could do that as part of a working group last call, or not. But that would be up to the other chairs, as I'm hopelessly conflicted. And this would be a good time if anyone wants to. Oh, we have Christian in the queue.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yes, Martin, I went through the same pains as you did with the same kind of results. It's very good that you document it. There is a dimension there, and the dimension is a version number. I mean, different OSs have different support based on version numbers. And I don't know whether you want to handle that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I hope the document is quite clear that it's a snapshot in time and that we are not speaking for anybody. And so I think one actually fairly positive outcome of this work would be maybe people would get together and like solve some of these problems. We'd agree on a common approach for these things. Please take a look at like the intro and the abstract, and if your sense is that it's not clear that it's a snapshot in time, it is not an authoritative source. This information draft is not authoritative for what happens in the future. I'd be happy to add text to make that clear.
No, it's actually very useful to have that, but it's just saying that basically, if you say Windows, for example, you still have a bunch of folks on Windows 7 or even Windows XP, and it's not quite the same thing.
I'm being fairly vicious about limiting the scope of this document. That said, if somebody wants to go and like, I mean, this is pretty much the bleeding edge of these platforms as I understand it. If someone would like to go say, you know, for Windows 7, you do this, I'm happy to add that text.
Jonathan Lennox, sorry, I didn't get in the queue. I think the answer is more like, if you're on anything before Windows 10, there's no way to receive ECN and life is just terrible, sorry. So,
if you would like to file a PR for that, Jonathan, that's great. I don't know how ambitious people are trying to do ECN stuff with like ancient versions of Windows. But again, I'll happily accept text if people would like to record for posterity the previous versions of things. Gory.
Putting myself in the queue in the room. I had two comments on this, and the first one was the TOS field, and thank you for adding some text. I think we really want to put big markers around when we use IP TOS, even though it's what the operating systems actually use as the byte, but the implications of thinking it as a TOS byte are entirely the problem we've been facing in deploying ECN in the first place. So yeah, thanks for adding that text, and please make sure that we don't in any way say that TOS still exists. It's just the name of a byte in a data structure. The second one was a little bit more completely futuristic. Is we've had a number of people talking about sending CE marks from the sender as ways of checking that the other end gets a CE mark if it's actually added by the network. And I think I asked, but I can't remember what the answer was. Did you look to see if you can set a CE mark at the sender with these stacks, just for reference so we know in future whether that is actually something that people can do?
I might be misremembering, but I believe Windows threw an error because Windows, as is implied by this table, does actually split the toss byte in the way that you sort of dream of. I don't think the other ones matter because it's still sort of treated notionally as a TOS byte that just contains whatever. That's my recollection. I haven't written it down anywhere, and I could be wrong, but I'm almost positive that's the state of play.
It would be super hugely helpful if we figured out what the current state of the art for that is, so we know whether we can ever build any mechanisms on top of it in the future.
Okay, can you file an issue and I'll see if I can put something together quickly. Thank you, Corey.
Okay, thank you.
Looks like Lorenzo's next.
Yeah, just wanted to say, I think the text mentions a V6 socket. People might think that that's what you get when you call socket of AFINET 6. It's not. What you get when you call socket of AFINET 6, you get a dual stack socket by default. So, as far as I know, you have to make it IPv6 only to make it a V6 socket, I believe. Anyway,
yes, the current default is that it will let you. Yes, you'll get a dual stack socket. And you explicitly have to set it to V6, and the graphic actually goes in a lot into dual stack sockets. That's one of the pain points here is that the expectations around dual stack sockets are quite different.
Right.
Some platforms you explicitly have to set the V4 sock opt as well, and other ones that's an error, which is not a great state of things.
I mean, and the other things, like I think the dual stack socket should probably go first because that's what generally apps use. But then yeah, it's anyway. Do I just email the list and like write the stuff down, or can I just do that? Or
yeah, like it's maybe. I'll take email. The least effort for me is just to file an issue in the GitHub, which is linked in the document.
Oh, okay.
But either one is fine.
So
Richard
Schaffenegger, speaking as an author for AccurDCN, especially answering to Gory's question, at least in the FreeBSD world and the BSD and Apple world, we can actually send out the CE mark directly from the host, and the AccurDCN draft does have plenty of text explicitly explaining that you should be doing this if you need to rely on this signal in order to know if the network is supporting this capability or not.
Thank you, Richard. It doesn't sound like the mic picked that up. He just said that in BSD, the CE mark, you can set the CE mark. And in fact, the AccurDCN draft says that you should set the CE mark periodically for testing purposes.
Yeah, and Richard, can you send some text to help Martin? An email or something?
All right, any other comments on this draft? If not, I'll just move to the other talk.
I have one to the comment made recently. For FreeBSD, if you create a socket with AFINET, whether you get it dual stack socket or not depends on the syscontrol variable. And the default is now that you get a V6 only socket. In the past, it was different. So it depends on the OS, and for some OSs, it depends on the version, but that has changed years ago. So for FreeBSD, it's V6 only per default.
Yeah, my impression is the V6 only sock opt was the defaults were a little bit fluid, and again, into my like militant scope leasing, I've been trying to not make this a sock opt manual, so it's not in the draft, but it does definitely talk about what happens with dual stack versus not V6 only. Okay, any other comments? No. Okay, can we go to the other? Go ahead.
So you plan to revise for the next meeting, yeah?
Oh, well before that. I hope we never present on this again. Right. So I hope to see these issues soon and resolve it like soon after this meeting. This straightforward stuff. And the question is, I mean, is there someone in Apple that can say I'm going to read this soon? That's in the room. Stuart's getting up. I like that.
Well, since you asked, I had to show, at least I was listening. Yes, I will take a look at this, or I'll talk to other people at Apple.
Thank you. Okay, in that case, I think we can wait for that to happen. I'm given some reasonable amount of time, and then once I've addressed the Apple comments, if any, then we can. I think I'm going to ask my fellow chairs for working group last call, whoever that might be at that time.
The process will run. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so the other one is just kind of maybe this is interesting thing to you. So as I've mentioned repeatedly, I've been working on deploying Quick ACK ECN to Chrome. I'm pleased to report, as a side note, that is now done. That is now it is on by default in Chrome version 133. So Quick ACK ECN should just be on pretty much on like a large number of internet clients as they update. I can't speak to the update cycles of Chrome derivatives like some of these other browsers out there that use Chrome networking stack, and how long it will, and Android apps, and how long it will take them to sync to to version 133 of Chrome. As that happens, I would expect that over those next few months and years that we have almost universal support for Quick ACK ECN in the client internet. So yay for that. So just as part of our process, we normally run a little experiment to make sure the code is working. So in that experiment, I just basically had a select number of Chrome hosts report, what ECN bits they were sending, and I accidentally did a giant internet survey. So I thought I'd share the results of that. I hesitate to call this like actual science, because I mean, what it is basically every time there's a quick connection for some set of Chromes that are executing the experiment, every time it has a quick connection or accords, it just has a bit for each code point it receives. And so you'll see, in theory, 16 different combinations of code points to arrive for the 4 ECN code points. Some of them you should never see, some of them should be quite common, and then it reports those up. And I'm not supposed to tell you how many hosts it is. I'll tell you the number ends in billion. But it is a measure of quick connections. So, you connect to Google, get on the order of 10 quick connections at google.com. That means it counts 10 times. If Chrome users go to google.com more often than example.com, then Google will be weighted more in the sample, etc. So, draw your own conclusions from that. But I've broken out these for various reasons that I probably can't divulge them, but I don't understand them anyway. The sample rates at different platforms are different, so I'm going to present the samples from different platforms separately. Next slide, please. Okay, this is an example of what I'm talking about, and as you can see, the dates of this experiment were in January, so things may have changed. But and I will say that Google is obviously, google.com is a significant number of Chrome connections, and Google does not send any ECT marks. So, take that what you will. But just to kind of run through this so you understand the methodology or the way I'm presenting this, about 99% of connections saw no ECT marks at all. Now, whether that's because the server's doing something or the network's doing some filtering, I can't say. 1% seem to be doing, roughly 1% seem to be doing RFC 3168 behavior, and you can see the breakout there on the block in the upper right, which is about, wait a minute, why don't those, right, okay. So about 36% of those saw a CE mark. So actually, it seems like the network's doing a pretty good job of marking stuff when it's marking stuff CE, when it's ECT 0. Half of those connections also had not ECT. I did a very informal poll on the Quick Dev Slack, and we're gonna remember this is Quick, not TCP. And apparently, that many Quick implementations have chosen to do not ECT in the handshake and then turn on to eliminate one reason for packets to get filtered, and then switch when the handshake is done. And so that's probably most what we're seeing here. But certainly, if there's some reason that the feedback is, if the network is mangling feedback somehow, then that will generally cause Quick to stop sending ECT. So that would be another reason to see not ECT. And I can't distinguish those cases with the data set I have, but most of it appears to be just this handshake thing, just based on some of the other statistics I collected. Okay, that was a long bit. I hope it goes faster from now. So about what we're another order of magnitude down from ECT 0 is ECT 1 stuff, which we assume is mostly L4S. And CE marks are quite rare, at least in January, although as I understand, Jason Livingood is working hard to bring that number up. And we have a similar proportion that are not ECT, that are shared with not ECT there for probably similar reasons. And there's a trace of just ECT0 and ECT1, which is just probably network misbehavior or possibly some SCE experiments that are out there. And then CE but not ECT, we can't classify as whether that's 3168 or 9330, but it's obviously a very, very small trace. Next slide. Okay, Chrome OS, nothing different here. Next slide. Mac OS, again, nothing really different. Next slide. Linux, next slide. And Windows, this is the only weird one. We saw way more CE marks to the extent I went back and looked at my Windows socket code and made sure I hadn't made a silly mistake. I cannot explain this discrepancy. 6% is just way more than any other platform. I don't know if Jason has any insight into this. He's shrugging, so I guess not. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting snapshot. I don't really plan to do any follow-up experiments in this vein, but I thought the community would be interested in it. So there you go, and I'm happy to take your questions. There's not another slide, is there? No. Richard. Oh, Lorenzo's first. I'm sorry. There's a queue. Or is that from before? Okay, go, Richard.
So maybe this has to do with Windows supporting data center TCP. So maybe people are more likely to actually enable.
I'm sorry. Can you eat the mic, Richard? If I can't hear, no one else can.
Okay. Maybe this has to do with Windows supporting data center TCP by default, and that makes it maybe more likely that networks in which Windows is proliferant to enable ECN for real.
He's saying that this might be that Windows is configured to support
Windows itself on TCP is supporting data center TCP.
Data center TCP, so that they may.
And for it to work, you need to have the switchers enable the AQM to actually do marking. So maybe that's
as good a hypothesis as any. Did you get that, Lars? Okay.
Okay, getting in the queue without getting in the queue because I'm sharing my screen.
It's not long. Go for it.
So two things. So if you're seeing ECT1, is it a valid conclusion that this connection is using L4S?
That's a great question. I would. I mean, what else would it be using? I mean, I guess it could be a 3168 legacy thing. It could be SCE, which, if I understand correctly, would have this ECT0, ECT1 signature that we're seeing.
Because then you would expect a lot of CE marks if you're doing L4S.
Yeah, assuming that the routers are deployed, right? And I think that's the problem. The bottleneck queues are not. I mean, there's certainly a minority pursuit at this point.
Yeah. And then another comment about the ECT0. The quick draft recommends doing a probing phase, sending 10 packets marked ECT0 and then switching back to not ECT. So that might explain why. I'm actually surprised that you're just seeing 50% not ECT in that case.
Again, my very informal, I don't want to say it was a poll and it was a long time ago, but there was a thread on the Quick Dev Slack about this, and apparently there's different implications that do different things. Some just sent it without really worrying about it, and some were very conservative about switching over from not ECT. Miria.
Yeah, about the not ECT as well. So is that mainly the handshake maybe, or did you exclude the handshake?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. The acoustics are terrible.
The not ECT, is that mainly handshake packets, or did you exclude the handshake packets?
Oh, again, each of these rows is a combination of packets observed in a quick connection. So if it does not ECT in the handshake and then sees something else, then that's in the ECT0 bin or the ECT1 bin. But the breakouts on the right say, if it says saw not ECT, that means it was a 3168 connection that also had some not ECT packets in it for whatever reason.
Okay, but you don't know if these not ECT are only the handshake packets or if they're later in the flow.
I have a different chart that I didn't think to get clearance for, but I would say that our indications are that that for the most part, that there's a transition at roughly when you expect a handshake to end. And so most of that we think is handshake, not ECT, followed by short headers with ECT marks. That said, like there are, like if I mean, you can certainly imagine other patterns, like when the network mangles a packet, it's going to cause bad feedback, and so other things might happen, but it seems to be dominated by this handshake transition.
I mean, that was kind of my question. It's like, is this normal behavior or is there some mangling happening? If you could like distinguish those two cases, that would be useful.
Yeah, agreed. Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you for bringing us data. Can we take Joel's slide, this one? Yeah. This is if we can share the deck, this will be a single slide from Joe touch on the user experiments draft. That was it. Yep. Yeah. It's painful. Okay. Joe's provided one slide. He's not at this meeting. With an update. Next slide. Which gives you the document status for the user experiments draft. It's passed working group last call. A number of issues were suggested, mainly to include the scope and refine the requirements for creating experimental uses of the port space. This is designed to help IANA. In particular, new words have been added for stun and turn. So if you know about stun and turn, and that would be really good to put eyes on the latest draft, just so that we know that this text is appropriate. And we've revised the IANA requests to align with what IANA asked for. So there's an updated version, I think, being posted. Please look at this, and the working group chairs will be looking to progress that after the completed working group last call. So this is a request for eyes on this if you have read the previous version, or if you know about stun and turn, to check that the interpretation of what would happen is appropriate. That's the end of that notice. Or contact Joe via the mailing list. Me as Anna? Yeah. This meeting's interesting. So at this moment, I have no hats, and I am representing one of the authors of a new individual draft. I'm representing Anna. Clearly, for those of you who've met Anna, I'm not Anna, but I'm a co-author with her. Okay, so the reason for creating this particular draft is to describe the Q-log aspects of the careful resume protocol. We've talked about careful resume, that's past working group last call and with our shepherd. But in that process, it was discovered that the Q-log part of that draft, which we were very keen to add because it adds support for tracing, but the Q-log spec itself had changed while we were developing the careful resume draft. And that raised two questions. Is it right to keep this in the draft itself, because that makes it only updatable by changing the careful resume protocol spec, or should it be in a separate document? And the decision by the document editors was to pull it out into a separate draft. So the second part of this, if we've made this separate draft, which I'll talk about, we would like to ask the working group to adopt it as a core item to work with careful resume. But we'll come to that at the end. Next slide, please. In Bangkok. The draft status says that this particular draft is very short, as is this presentation. It's just 9 pages long. So if you've been and read careful resume, thanks ever so much as part of the editing team for that. Please have a look at this draft. 9 pages includes the boilerplate and references, so it's a very short read. And most of it is text removed from careful resume with a table of states, a list of definitions, and a bunch of CDDL notation to describe how this Q-log will work. And the reason I'm here pretending to be Anna with her smiley face is, can TSVWG please adopt this work as a work item, to publish this separately as a separate document along with the careful resume spec. And it's for this working group to determine. We would estimate that if we continue writing the QLog part, the work will be done soon, but we'll then have to coordinate with the QLog authors to produce a final transition date so that both specs are fully aligned when published. And my question is, anybody, any comments on the process or questions about the draft?
Mia Kulewind again. So first of all, I think it's good to have it in a separate draft. I have a high-level process question. Are we supposed to put the QLog stuff into the quick working group, or is the model for QLog in future that all the working groups can do their own QLog on their own extensions?
Thank you for asking a process question, which I anticipated. So I have spoken to Lucas, and Lucas assures me that although this work could be done in Quick, if the Quick Working Group toolkit, it would be more normal to do MIBS and Yang in the working group that originates the spec and to coordinate with the other group, which would suggest it could be done here according to the chair of the Quick Working Group. Do the chairs of TSVWG wish to comment? And would Mira like to comment? This is what we should be discussing now.
Yeah, I don't have concerns. I think we should bring it up in the quick working group because I think that will also define the model that we want to use in future. So we all agree.
Bring it up means coordinate with rather than ask for adoption, or we should ask for adoption.
At least make the quick working group aware, like in the chair slide of the quick session or whatever.
I can't make that happen, but I can request that to happen. Okay, yeah, sure. Clearly, yeah. Reviewers of this include Martin, which means that we're kind of going round in circles here because Martin's involved with defining QLog. So I defer to my chairs to decide what happens next with my talk. Do you want to do anything at this moment? Or any Martin? Oh, Lucas in the queue. That's even better. Wonderful. Hello, Lucas.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Indeed, you sound better and clearer than the people in the room due to our current mics.
Okay, great. So yeah, Gori and I have talked a bit about this. I'm wearing kind of both a QLog editor hat and a quick chair hat. QLog is making good progress. We have a few things to do. There's quite a few specs. There's going to be a little bit more iteration and churn. I was concerned that including the very useful definition of the QLog events and the careful resume would tie up the design work that has been done. That's also really good, and that would be sad if we get caught in lots of rounds of editorial review of the QLog spec. So that's kind of why I prefer this split, but that's purely reflective of where we are today. Like in a year's time, if someone like yourselves was to write an extension to a transport or a network protocol, or even a brand new network protocol, it would make sense to define a QLog thing alongside that, as you did, in which case we wouldn't ask the question, should the quick working group adopt work that's already been adopted somewhere else? So it is a bit of a weird thing. It feels to me that TSVWG should own this with help from myself and other QLog enthusiasts to give you reviews and keep you up to date. When we go and change something, we can just have you as a downstream and give you a poke and say, this needs to be that. We could raise it in the quick working group as just a chair slide. I don't think anything needs to be done there, but if we really had to, we could. And to give a different counter example, there's work going on in the Media Over Quick working group, who also wanted some QLog events to help them trace and analyze things relevant to them. And I put together an example schema for some of the events that they would like. And it's very telling in that case that the events are specific to what the Media Over Quick working group is trying to do with their protocol. And it really wouldn't fit the Quick working group to adopt that document because we don't know what they're trying to do, what helps them, and what makes sense. So it kind of depends what hat you're wearing, but I think we can figure this out without too much pain and overhead.
Thanks, Lucas.
Jonathan.
Hello, yes. Jonathan Lennox. Well, my first comment, something I also said on the chat, is I think TSVWG already adopted this work. You're just choosing to split it into 2 drafts. So I don't think we need to ask the question. You're just, as an editor, you're making an editorial choice that this would work better as 2 drafts, which I agree with personally. The second is, it sounds like, and maybe Lucas is going to kill me, what we need is a QLog directorate to review working groups. Review other working groups' use of QLog.
Thanks for that comment. I'm not going to let Lucas say anything in response to that, but I'm going to say that obviously we sought review of this from the QLog editors who happen to be include the quick chairs. So I think we are actually pretty much looked up for review for this particular document. Yeah.
Martin.
Yeah, I'm next as chair. Well, first of all, QLog director sounds like a great task for the incoming WIT AD. My question was, as chair, like, have you gotten much engagement from the working group already on this document, or is this an attempt to get people to read it? I mean, does it make any sense for me to do the standard questions for adoption now, or do we want to like give people a chance to read it first?
The change is one trigger, which was commented by somebody in the group as missing. Otherwise, it's the text from the other document. So as in, this was originally a section in the careful resume spec, which we've gone through working group last call on, but is now a separate part of the spec. So I leave this to process.
So I guess I'm asking, is it worthwhile for me to spend the time to do a formal show of hands on who's read the draft, or do you think we should wait until people have actually had a chance to internalize this presentation and then go read it?
I am not answering the question. I'll let other people talk about it and figure out. I mean, this doesn't matter to me whether this is adopted right now or in some time in the short time. It really makes no difference. It's just to make the group very aware of what's going on.
Go ahead, Zahid.
Yes. So while I'm still AD of TSVWG and Quick, what I would like to see here on the process question is like Quick working him to the QLog, also they define how to extend it. And then rest of the IETF or anywhere else, we can actually extend QLag. And then I'm actually not taking Jonathan's suggestion as a joke, or like I'm really thinking like something, at least part of the TSB art, when you are doing like TSB art reviews, if somebody is extending QLog, we can have an extra look at it. So that would be the thing. And for this particular working, this document, I kind of tend to agree, like this is TSVW's work. We are well coordinated already with quick working groups, so we can do back and forth and all this thing. But at the end of the day, maybe it's better that quick working group finishes the QLog and also defines how to extend the QLog. That would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you for the suggestion. That's good.
Okay, I'm just going to, I just created one of these little polls. If you don't want to use the Meet Echo thing, you can just raise your hand in the room. I'm just wanting to see if like people actually read this. Just leave it open for maybe 30 seconds. I just want to, I don't think we should approve something nobody has read, but we could just do it. Yeah. Wow, people have read it. Okay, going once. Does anyone need more time? Okay, let the record show that 6 people out of 32, out of 33, let me stop it and then announce it. 6 out of 33 said they had read the draft. Well, we already got comments on the chat, so I'm just going to see what. All right, I'm just going to create another connection, another question. So the question is, do you think we should adopt it? if you're concerned about this draft because you haven't read it, feel free to say no and articulate that at the mic. A lot of people are happy to adopt it without having read it, which I guess is not abnormal. Does anyone need more time? Raise your hand if so. I mean, raise your hand physically if so. All right, I'm going to close it in 3, 2, 1. So the final vote is 23 in favor of adoption, no objections, and as expected, a number of no opinions. So we will, of course, confirm this in the list, but things are looking pretty good for adoption. Thank you, everyone. We're ready for the next agenda item.
So back as a chair, I would like to invite Jason up. We hope so.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Jason Livingood back to talk about our dual queue low latency deployment. So we announced it publicly, outside of this technical community in late January. And importantly, got lots of positive press attention, which our, management liked. And we also spent a lot of time educating executives about what latency was and why it was important, and bandwidth wasn't the only solution, which I counted as a big win in and of itself. Next slide. So we are currently at 2 million homes deployed. In 2 or 3 weeks, we'll be up around 5 million and keep going. I would say in December and January, those numbers were, fairly modest. We did some analytical work in February and, started ramping back up, recently. So those numbers will grow. And we're doing 3 things at the same time. First, the top 2 are L4S and NQB, so dual queue. That's happening at the same time. We're also enabling downstream active queue management. For those of you that haven't heard me say this before, we did upstream active queue management in 2020 during the COVID pandemic when the work from home stuff first started, sort of rushed it out very quickly. And that helped in the upstream direction for DOCSIS 3.1 modems. Downstream AQM is getting turned on at the same time that we're doing dual queue, and that benefits any modem that's on the CMTS, irrespective of DOCSIS version. So, 203, 031, etc. Next slide. So the first thing that we've been doing is deploying on our own cable modem code base, which is running RDK software. So that's XB6, XB7, and XB8 are the model numbers. We'll continue that and should wrap up in the early part of April, so just a few more weeks. The next step after that is to do retail, sort of customer-owned and admin modems. So we'll pick from a list of those. Yes?
Yeah, I'm sorry, clarifying question on the previous, Martin Duke, Google. On this, so you say you're rolling out the downstream queue thing with, so are those part of a unitary update? So that like if a device has L4S support in the upstream, then they also get the downstream AQM at the same time, or is that not synchronized that way?
They're not necessarily synchronized. The best way to describe it would be the CMTS software gets updated and it supports downstream AQM for everybody. And then subsequent to that, we start enabling individual modems for dual queue, and dual queue happened to also be enabled on the CMTS as well. So you could theoretically have a scenario where you had a modem that couldn't do dual queue because it was maybe a COAM modem, it was a DOCSIS 3 modem or something, but it would get downstream AQM. So it's sort of part of a larger, lower latency project that we have.
Okay, I was planning to conduct an experiment on your ASN. So I'll get with you offline to coordinate on this. Thanks.
Next slide. So going back to this one, a lot of latency there. Wow, that's sorry. The COAM modems are coming next, and we're focused on modems that are currently being certified for what we would call our next gen networks, so our full duplex DOCSIS networks. The reason being is those are vendors that are currently in lab actively developing their software rather than ones that shipped it 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years ago and aren't going to be wanting to come back into the lab again. So, that stuff will be coming out fairly soon. Then also commercial cable modems for our small to medium-sized business customers. And then moving on to our EPON network, which is obviously smaller at the moment than our DOCSIS network. Next slide. So some bumps in the road. We've had some fun times, and I'll reveal one of them here, not all of them. We continue to do deep analytics about how is the deployment population, what's the health look like. So we look at everything from trouble calls, any customer contact at all, unexpected reboots of a device, truck rolls to a customer's location, a whole host of different statistics. And throughout the deployment, we would do, typically the approach we took was that we would not actively reboot a modem when it got its new configuration. We would let it happen organically, which depending upon the customer would happen in, 1, 2, 3 weeks. And they might have a power cycle or a store manager or what have you, or we would be doing a reboot for another reason. And so we let the organic thing happen most of the time, but we would conduct experiments periodically where we would say, okay, we're deploying low latency onto this set of devices. We're going to actively reboot them right now in the maintenance window so that they reboot and pick up the configuration file, and then study that particular population over a period of days and weeks to see, how that diverged or didn't diverge from a health and contact standpoint. Again, just to make sure that we're not negatively affecting reliability or contact rates and these kind of things. And so we had it's now humorous, but it was panic inducing at the time where we had an analysis and we said, wait a second, oh my God, all of a sudden we had this divergence of all these modems that were rebooting in our population unexpectedly. What was wrong? And as we went into the analysis, we realized that some of those reboots happened outside of the maintenance window, sort of beyond when they were supposed to, and so completely skewed the data set, and we had to throw it out. We started again and reran the experiment, and it ended up fine. And this was the chart, and the control group, we were actually below the reboot rate of the control group. So turned out fine in the end, but, for like a week, we were all in a complete panic about it. But we continue to do that ongoing analysis to make sure that that population is not diverging in any way. And it's important because when you get to the number of deployment, customers deployed that we have, you would absolutely begin to notice even small differences in contact rates and complaint rates and like something's not working right. And so for us, it's been very reassuring to see all of those traditional signals that we use to track reliability and customer satisfaction, trending, in a good way and looking really no different than the control population or what happened before. Next slide. So in terms of observations, the first is when we turned on downstream active queue management, whether this is for a non-dual queue customer or a dual queue customer, we're seeing a roughly 50% drop in the latency under load at P99. And that's on our newer virtual CMTS platform. Some of our older integrated CMTSs have even higher, like around 100 milliseconds of normal P99. So an even better improvement for those, if you're coming from an ICMTS. And I think roughly half our footprint is on the virtual platform now. And then you can see the stats for the dual queue, ultra low latency queue, if you will. So basically marked for L4S. The only thing that I'll note there is that, we're still evolving that test a little bit. It's also, of course, still a synthetic test, not as great as being able to look at an application that is actually implementing dual queue and what they are seeing in terms of their improved quality experience. But looking positive for the moment, but we continue to tweak that measurement a little bit. Next slide. So that's it. I'll leave anybody if they have questions. I can't see who's in the queue, but we're continuing to deploy. Rudiger?
Yep. Hi. You you have mentioned latency under load test. As far as I recollect, that's the name of an ITUT standard. Did you deploy that, or is that accidentally?
No, it's not an IT. We're not doing any ITUT stuff. It's just our own internal stuff running, working latency test. We've toyed with using other third-party tests as well on
All
our
right.
internal gateways, but we're not running that on the RDKB platform.
Right. Thank you.
Yep.
Lorenzo Coliti, two questions actually. Going back to this graph, do I read correctly that idle latency round trip is something like 35 to 40 milliseconds?
No, that's not idle. That's working latency at the 99th percentile. So think about like pretty much your worst case loaded latency. On the DOCSIS network, typically you're going to see 15 to 17 milliseconds of idle latency, mostly because of link layer stuff.
Okay, so then like if I add 15 in each direction, it is 30 then.
This is one direction. We're just looking at downstream, in the downstream direction. So, we are running the tests, upstream and downstream.
Like if I add like, look, the graph on the left looks like whatever, 17, and on the right also looks like 16 if I add them together. Perhaps I'm interpreting it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, we're not running the way that our current test works in our gateway. We run sort of a downstream test, then we run an upstream test. So they're sort of happening independently, not simultaneously.
For me, sort of more sort of deployment perspective, right? Trying to think how we could take some numbers like this and see if we could get some app developers interested, right? Because I think there's a couple of things here, right? Their latencies are going to be much higher than this, right? So their request latency is going to be maybe in the hundreds, perhaps of milliseconds, because a bunch of other components. Do you see any changes in loss? Like, do you see like for typical HTTP requests, for example, do you see the latency multiplying, or is it just, if it took 150 milliseconds before, it's now whatever 132 milliseconds?
Well, it depends on how the application works. Obviously, I showed one of the last few IETFs some stats from the app partners, and as I say at the bottom of this slide here, like I think those in-app measurements are a lot better than these synthetic ones, and a lot of them showed their sort of working latency, like in-game, for example, or in-video session, were approaching what the idle latencies were. And so, that was a pretty substantial change from that standpoint. And they also saw much more consistent latency, so they didn't see these jitter spikes all the time. So that was better from an app standpoint, responsibility.
And so right, and I think in general also users in the field may have these older platforms where the impact is going to be better, right? So I'm literally, so when talking about somebody like, I don't know, like developers of the Google search app, right? Like what is going to get them to sort of sit up and take notice, right? I mean, I think we could sort of try and find some customers of yours that are, and see, I'm not sure how we would even find out if they have the right modem or so on. And then we basically try to like, edit the code and see if it gets better. And it seems kind of, do we have any other way than that? I guess we don't.
I mean, you can try, using the ECN bits and, seeing if it's.
Oh, right. So just, yeah. Basically doing a proof of concept, just marking it and seeing if it gets better. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And for figuring out whether any sort of like Google or customer of yours did or did not have this, what do we do? Do we email you or?
Yeah, I mean, the key determinant right now is number one, are you on a virtual CMTS? And number two, what device do you have? And
yeah, how would they know? I guess is.
Yeah, I mean, the average customer would not. I've asked for.
So we will email you.
You would know generally right now based on your speed. So if you have a higher upstream speed, so for example, if you have above 35 megabits per second upstream, you're on a newer vCMTS. So those are going to have 100 megs plus typically upstream, if not approaching symmetric in some cases.
Thanks.
Yep.
Stuart Cheshire from Apple. I jumped up because of Lorenzo's comment, and I think it's important that everybody remembers you don't get low latency just by setting the ECN bits. Low latency is not some privilege that the network bestows on some privileged applications. The ECN bits is what enables the application to give itself low latency by not sending data too fast and filling up the queue. So you can't just write a PF rule that sets the ECN bits and say, why didn't I get low latency? You've got to react to the results of that. And I guess while I'm standing up here, can we go to like slide 2 or whatever it was when you had like, I think you had like a press release or a headline or something? That's
one more.
Keep going. There was something about customers.
One more. That one.
Yeah, that's the one. So my comment's a little bit tongue-in-cheek because you're probably tired of me saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Customers, applications require more than fast speeds. I really think it's really helpful when we're spreading this message to use the word throughput or capacity, because customers want speed. They want things to be faster. The message is that more capacity doesn't necessarily make things faster. And maybe you said that, and
You
your
know,
SVP
the irony
Emily
is
said
that
we want to say speed.
I used your name repeatedly with our executives and said, I would be remiss if I didn't say that Stuart Cheshire would yell at me if we didn't change speeds. And like, we can't say, you know, throughput or bandwidth, like we always say speed. And that's what I'm like.
All right. I owe you a beer. Thanks.
Yeah. But anyway, coming back to one question that Lorenzo mentioned about how does a customer know if they're on this sort of next-gen network? We know that's a problem, and I can't say too much more other than like there'll be some divergence in the near future about how the products are defined and worked that are on our newer next-gen virtualized network versus the sort of legacy network that's drawing down on CMTS. So, you know, there'll be some changes there. So it'll be much more clear, I think, to people to understand that, hey, they have these higher speeds and other capabilities.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks.
Greg.
All right, was it locked? All right.
Queue's closed. Sorry, we're behind schedule now. Magnus, you're solo on notes right now.
All right. L4S ops. Slides are coming up, presumably. This draft has been around for, I think, 4.5 years to document some recommendations around ensuring that L4S can be deployed across the internet without issues. There were some at least theoretical situations that can exist in the internet along the path that could give L4S traffic more than its fair share of capacity. And this draft is all about ways to detect if that's happening and what to do to prevent it from happening or stop it from happening. You'll notice that it says draft 07. I actually thought I had posted a draft 07 yesterday. Apparently did not make it through into the data tracker. I'll get that rectified shortly, but next slide. I talked about the scope. The status of this, we do have a milestone to submit this as an informational RFC next month. And the note there is that if any new information becomes available on this subject, perfectly fine to start a revision of this. But as I said earlier, the draft has been discussed in the working group for about 4.5 years, and so I think it's in pretty good state. Gori did a recent review and sent comments to the mailing list, a list of editorial suggestions. Those I have updated in the draft 07. Two more substantive comments were that the security consideration section is currently blank and should not be blank. And so if anyone is aware of any security considerations that arise from the informational draft itself, please let me know. Please post to the mailing list or submit a PR against the repo. Otherwise, my plan is to reference the security consideration sections in the relevant RFCs that define L4S. So it's 9330, 9331, 9332, as well as the classic ECN RFC. One other item is there remained a to-do in the text, and the paragraph or the sentence, I guess, that it refers to is quoted there on the slide. This is all in a section talking about a host being able to detect that one of these single queue RFC 3168 bottlenecks exists, and cache a list of networks or IP addresses where that has happened, where that's been detected, so that in the future it could disable L4S if it chooses to on those networks or hosts. And then entries in such a cache would need to age out after a period of time to account for IP. I can't read anymore. Anyway, the comment was a request from a reviewer some time ago asking for more details on how a host would manage that queue or sorry, manage that list of hosts or networks where this 3168 has been detected. We have not gotten any input from anyone in the working group yet on that. I think that to-do has been listed for some time. If anyone has suggestions on things that should be documented in the draft, now is the time to provide them, please. If not, I think we'll just simply delete the to-do and leave the draft as it is. So, and then last point, just in general, if anyone feels that there's text missing from the draft, now is the time. Please do a review and suggest any changes that you'd like to see. We will be going to working group last call very soon. Any questions or comments?
Looks like the queue is empty. So thank you, Greg. So next up, I think, is Magnus is the DTLS thing. As he makes his way up here, first of all, Greg, thank you for the talk, and you're now, thanks again for backing up Magnus on the notes while he's up here. At the top of the meeting, I kind of hinted a couple times about, if you could get out of your niche, maybe take an interest in some drafts that maybe are not the thing you're here for. This is a topic where, as a chair, I would say we could really use some people to develop a technical opinion. We have a very small set of people that are like SCTP enthusiasts, and they are not in agreement. And it's hard to have consensus when you have 3 people and it's 2 to 1 to move forward. So if we got a bunch of eyes on it, and maybe that we'd be able to develop a rough consensus to move forward if the principals can't reach agreement on things.
Yeah, just to follow up on Martin there. I mean, this really is 2 areas where you could have an opinion, and also the overall shape of this might be important to you. There's more than 2 groups. There's more than 2 ways to slice the cake. So this isn't just a slicing issue. There is a multidimensional question about where you want to implement it and what you might be using it for. So it's something where we really should get together, and we've given you a period of time to articulate and try and help people to interrupt and offer questions or clarification. So if you have any doubt, just come to the mic and talk, and that will be helpful. Over to Magnus.
Thank you. So, okay, so I'm Magnus Westlund. Let's take this DTLS for SCTP one more spin here. Next slide. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk about where we are with the different options, bringing up what we see one requirement that wasn't really discussed, or which is one of the major reasons for, to say, Ericsson's position in this case on our options as we see it, and why this becomes hard. But and I will discuss. I think I'm easily well representing what Michael Tuxen sent us in the email that went out earlier yesterday, actually. There are IPR declarations around this work. On option 1, there's these 2. option 3 and 4 is covered by the second one, which is our Ericsson's declaration, where we say that they are licensed. You don't have to license on certain conditions. Please review that. And there's a friend on option 3 at the handshake part. So just so next slide. So let's start with this requirement. What came through in this discussion from our perspective is about the timing aspects of how quickly we can deliver the work. And one aspect of this is when it comes to security is, do you need to do formal verification on the security solution? And we have tried to avoid doing such changes to, for example, details, etc. So, I would say that the track record might not be the best for TSVWG's defined security solutions. And clearly, yes, doing formal verification could help avoiding issue, but they do take time. And that's time from our perspective that doesn't really exist to deliver something in 3GPP so that it can be useful at all. We have the update to the STP auth to fix the known issues there, and that might also maybe require formal verification to actually ensure that we haven't screwed up again with the changes and the fixes. We also have this aspect when it comes to some of the security libraries, etc., which comes down to recertification of implementation, because in certain deployments, etc., you might need to have certified implementations. That's on another time scale, maybe than formal analysis, but it's still things that take time to get done, etc., and cost money and all these things. So, so that's one aspect. I don't know if anyone has comment on this aspect. When we did the design team, we did discuss aspects around not wanting to change the details implementation, but this is slightly more detailed aspects of why we don't want to change the implementations. So when it comes actually around standards, etc., as well as the implementation. Okay. If no one has comment, let's go on. So now let's just refresh our mind on what the option was. This was the first kind of working group draft proposal we had from that we defined, which we from Ericsson wasn't particularly happy with for a number of reasons, mostly related to how it interacted with the STP stack and knowing that you had outstanding data or not, etc. And it's also dependent on STP auth update. And this one has then round up IPR. So it was about creating a fragmentation layer, individually details record protect each fragment, and then reassembly those set of details records into a protected user message. And then have STP auth ensuring that no one could change the order, etc., of injecting these parts of the user message back into, so that the reassembly would be wrong. Let's go on to option 2. So this is my understanding of what the kind of proposed variant of this, which would try to avoid the IPRs, which would use for rekeying instead the TLS extended key update mechanism, use RFC 9261 for reauthentication, and use PPID-based fragmentation scheme. You see the difference is in the lower orange boxes there where it says user message 1, 2, 3, 4. So each details record will be sent as its own user message, and then using PPID as indicator of, oh, this is a fragment or is this the last for a particular user message, as a way of saying. And that also mechanism resulted in certain limitations when it comes to STP. Some of these unordered delivery kind of choices, etc., was not working. You need to have reliable in-order delivery for this to fully work with this fragmentation mechanism. So that was option 2. Let's go on to option 3. I actually have 2 slides on option 3. So this is option 3 from the perspective of a user playing stack, or if you implement everything in one layer, so to say. So this is, you can have one detailer stack, you have its API, and you can call it from both the SCTP chunk handler for the detailless protection, as well from the key management. And that's ensure that, okay, you have one consistent state, you have one instance. And that makes the use of a one detailer stack fairly simple. And this all comes down to saying that because detailer stack contains sequence numbers, etc., you have a replay window aspects of this, and ensuring you can't reuse the sequence number because then you screw up the security. So it's really important to not do mistakes here. And because the ordering of this is that when you, for example, if the detailer stack generates, for example, a key day update message, that will go out to the details key management and sent down through the stack. And that user message containing the details, end-to-end details message here will be re-protected again as part of an SCTP or several SCTP packets. And because that when it arrives, it will first be protected, reassembled, and then decrypted a second time, you will be kind of out of order compared to the protections. You will have to have enough replay window here to support this. So that's one kind of small potential concern, but it's having enough replay window here we don't see as a problem from our perspective. But let's go on to the next slides, I think, to represent better what Michael concerns and why he proposes option 4. So if you actually have a kernel space implementation and you want to have this separated and you want to just implement the record processing down in the kernel, you end up with this quite a bit more messy picture where you're going to have to split your detailer stack into 4 handshakes initially. So that's epoch 0 to 2. You probably do the record processing up in your own stack, one thing, but then for any subsequent message for epoch 3 and forward, you will have to first take out the keys from the stack, push them down to the record processing layer, and then send the epoch, your message you want to protect, which is coming from the like additional key updates or alert messages. They would have to also be sent from top layer down to the kernel for being protected, because that's where the state now resides for this epoch. Get it protected and get it back up, and then send it down through the stack and let the details check handler protect any outgoing SCTP packets. So yes, we do understand that this is not that clean from that perspective. It's possible, but it's not the nicest when it comes to how the API. And this means that for this particular implementation, that's where you would end up with also a detailer stack which needs to be changed. So then we come to option 4, which is my understanding of what Michael's proposal would be to define a basically detailer-based record processing layer for the chunk that will protect. You would do a key export from a DTLS or even a TLS stack up in the key management layer. And then you would separate these two completely. They will be independent because they have fully separated keys. Let's see. Which allows them to, so the detailer stack, there's the modification to the detailer stack up in the user space and the record processing. However, then you need to define this record processing layer to be consistent with a clear API. How do you ensure certain things like keys? Do you need a key update, or you need to have rekeying triggers, etc. when you're getting close to using up a whole key? We also have the questions of, because it's no longer detailless, will all detailless new ciphers, etc., work in this context? How you get the definition of that that ends up with this security layer. So we have to then cannot use just DTLS as it is, as negotiated based on that, but we have to actually then extend this record processor with do ciphers too. So from a specification point of view, it becomes more maintenance, etc., plus the verification of this work. So, and these are the aspects we are not that happy with when it comes to this proposal. So yes, so that's the 4 proposals. So I'm actually quite unclear of how to be progress from here. I think we need input or saying if someone has changed or has further views of how they want to see this. From my perspective, the timing of this is we're fairly close to having run out of time from having any impact on 3DPP, I think, in a reasonable, because it's like this becomes very old. We've been working on this for 4 years now. So we have Michael in the queue.
Could I ask a question of Michael first?
Yes.
So Michael Tuxen, if you would try and answer, did the slides that Magnus summarized for us capture what your views were of the different stacks, at least, so that we understand whether you are synchronized or not? Because it would be nice to know that.
Yeah, let me make a can you go back to this slide? 1 slide back, I guess.
This slide?
Yes. So in my view, you do some DTLS. So DTLS record processing for me means you encrypt things and you do the replay protection. And this is done for DTLS messages like key updates, and the same computation is done for the chunk value of the crypto chunk. So you take the crypto chunk, you use the crypto chunk header and put in the outcome of the DTLS record header. That is functionally identical. And if you want to, but this computation has this functional part and the state, the variables, and the suggestion in option 3 is to share the state. And my concern is to have shared state between 2 functions which are independent. That's why I wrote in the email an example where whatever the replay window is, you just drop a packet, send another one, and then a packet will be dropped. So that is what I have. That's my conceptual concern. From an implementation point of view, technically you can't share the state. That doesn't work. So you have to have one record layer implementation. That would be if you run a userland DTLS stack over the kernel, it would be in the kernel and you would run everything there, which means you need to split out the record layer from the DTLS implementation. That's possible from an implementation point of view, but the shared state between these 2 different functions is something which concerns me, where I would say implement the record layer in the kernel, but use for the keys, use something from the key exporter, not the same keys, and have separate replay windows.
May I comment on the shared state? I mean, I agree that shared state is not, I mean, I think the implementation I'm trying to speak for option 3 is to actually, when you are after epoch 3 and forward, rather to push anything you want to protect it down to the place where have the state and then get the message back, rather than trying to share the state.
No, I mean, conceptually, so conceptually, you are sharing the state between the record processing and the chunk processing, conceptually. For you, it's the same function. You run it through the same code.
Yes,
and what I'm saying is, if I would need to implement this in a world where I have a userland DTLS stack and a kernel SCTP stack, I would put it down in the kernel, and the DTLS stack would just give down, here's my key update message unencrypted, please encrypt it. So it would then be encrypted by the kernel part, put into the send buffer, and later on the crypto chunk computation will happen. So it's doable, but still we have the concern of the shared state. That's why I said use different keys, and then you can use an unmodified DTLS implementation on top of this.
Okay, so Magnus nodded, so that hopefully means that we're in sync now.
Yeah.
We'll take Martin, and then we'll take any other questions. So Martin first.
Martin Duke, Google. Clarifying question. Wait, did we just come to agreement, or?
We came to agreement what the slide said.
Okay, excellent.
So that was good.
Well, not excellent, but I just want. I mean, I was going to sit down if we were already done. All right. So you presented 4 options. Just to be clear, so as it stands, you were recommending option 3, and Michael was recommending option 4.
Yes.
Okay. And if I recall correctly, your earlier slide, both option 3 and option 4 have IPR disclosures associated with them, but 3 has 2 instead of 1. But they both have IPR.
So yeah, so the part which so to saying the chunk handler related IPR is released under a license which is defensive and doesn't only if you're gonna have try to you need a license on Ericsson if you're gonna try to get basically it's the defensive kind of statement.
Okay, so the upshot is that 4's IPR encumbrance is much lighter than 3's.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But for 3, it's really just on the what we have IPR on is part of this rekeying mechanism for long-lived sessions. That's where you need it.
Okay, thank you.
Next in queue is Michael. That's good.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question, because when I saw these slides when they were online, I was kind of, are we back before last IETF, but now we have 4 options instead of 3? So we are choosing again, or because you listed option 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. So
and option 2 is the one without IPRs. So
yes, because I think during the last IETF, I mean, option 2 had some preference from certain parties, and that's what we're trying to compromise around. I just didn't want to exclude any options, even if I think we have different views, etc. But yeah, it's unclear how certain other parties who might have impact actually standing now on these proposals. So.
Any commercial players?
We do have more comments, and after we get to the end of the comments list, the chairs will ask, what can people live with? I mean, if any of these options are livable with, then we'd like to know. If you're an interested implementer or an interested user, we'd like to know which ones you would live with. However, let's go through our questions first. Jonathan?
Yeah, Jonathan Lennox. So you at the beginning you said you were worried about anything that required formal verification. Which options would that be that require formal verification?
So 1 and 2 probably requires formal verification of the STP auth fix.
Does extended key update also?
Sorry?
Extended key update would also require that, or the TLS extended key update draft, which I think one of these has as a dependency.
Yes, the extended update is also expected to. I mean, yes, that's ongoing, or it's expected to be started, or something like that. It's.
So you're less worried about that because it's in the TLS group?
No, I mean, saying. I mean, that's why we haven't talked about option 3 and 4, or option 3 has one proposed way of dealing with the handshake, which doesn't require, we just use multiple multiple DTLS sessions to create new keys. And that we don't see as saying, okay, you replace one session with the next one and doing all the re-authentication and rekeying by using that. And therefore, we don't see that require formal verification. Options 4's key management hasn't been fully specified or exactly. It might be using key update. It could use our handshake drafts. Both would work.
And I guess just my related question is just back to, Michael said he thought that we had sort of converged on 2. What is the problem with 2? Because that's the one that doesn't have IPR.
The problems with 2?
Yeah.
From my perspective, it's been the timeline to complete it, as well as the formal verification of both.
Okay.
So, okay, you're done. Jahed, perhaps as an individual here. So I just wanted to understand all of these 4 options from the implementation point of view. I mean, these figures are good. I mean, these are really descriptive, but it's still a bit like if you go through option 1 and option 2 to 4, I mean, where is the preferred? How? So, for example, option 4, how we prefer to implement it. I mean, is
Sorry,
it
I can't hear you. What are you saying?
Okay. Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I was thinking like if we can go through like option 4, option 1 to option 4 and look into the deployment thing, because there was another discussion happened previously. It's like open source and not. We have this kernel space, user space, open source or not. So I was thinking like if we go for like option 4, what is the deployment? My understanding is like we still having splitting this up, the implementation in the user space and kernel space, right? It's still
Yeah.
in the option 4.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the burden on what's most complicated shifts a bit between the different versions, etc. I think it's both are. Which aspect are you referring to? I think it's like I think option 2, 3, and 4. Any kind of kernel parts can be implemented based on IPR. So that aspect, I think, is.
And that IPR is like the assertive, like the.
If you're fine with the defensive statement,
Defensive
3 on 4, it's yes.
Okay. Okay.
Michael?
So the defensive style, the defensive part, what you say is the SDP part can be implemented in open source for option 4, right?
Yeah.
And the question is, but I think the question of open source versus non-open source was for the overall solution. So we might end up with option 4 and using maybe not the key mechanism you propose. So we could use a long-living DTLS connection with extended key updates for the key management, which would avoid the IPRs.
Is that correct? What Michael Tuxen is saying correct, right?
So saying 4, I mean, just like 4 can use, you could use either of. I mean, the whole point is you need a TLS or DTLS session to extract the keys from.
Yeah.
And if you're going to do rekeying, re-authentication, etc., you may see look at what is the requirement of the changes between 1 and 2. That's your pick, basically, for the same reasons. It's like, okay, what changes do you have there? I would say that, and I mean, you can do 4 as long as you don't need rekeying without IPR, because our IPR is just for the rekeying part in the way of replacing one set with a second connection, etc., and using that state.
So I mean, just to be clear for everybody's information, which of these 4 option is like IPR free? Is there any option you presented today.
I can't state it's IPR free, but if known how the declaration looks like is that's
option 2.
No, well, I mean, it has no declaration on it.
Okay. I mean that's the we deal with the current information that we have right now. So option 2 doesn't have any declaration of any IPR right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the problem is you don't have a clear description of 4 in a draft which you can declare on either. So it's I just made basically a verbal declaration here or in the slide saying that based on that 4 looks like 3, the same IPR on the kernel part would assume apply, and our declaration would stand for that solution.
One further comment I made in my email is that if you use your proposed key management, you need multiple DTLS connections, and that's why you have fields in the crypto chunk dealing with that. If you use a single DTLS connection, you won't need it. So if we go forward with the crypto chunk, my proposal would be to move the definition of this multiple of the DTLS connection identifier and that stuff to your proposed key management draft, because it doesn't make sense that everyone implements this if it's using a key management which is using only a single DTLS connection. And you can register flags in other drafts for.
So I think you're wrong there. You at minimal need some key ID field for the DTLS chunk header, because you need to be able to switch keys, and you will have to, at some point in the session, you will have packets in flight with both different key IDs. And especially if you're using something like ASGCM or something which has a fairly limited key lifetime.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, I take that back.
Yeah.
Hi, is it my turn yet?
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Francisco Miragi. In this option 4, is there a provision to offload the key management to hardware security modules like TPM? That would be more secure, right? Because it's related to the hardware.
Michael, are you in line to answer?
I think you can do this. This is implementation specific, but you need to make sure that you process the packets in sequence.
Okay.
Okay. What would you like the chairs to do? We could ask who wants particular features. Get people to feedback on that. We could ask who could live with particular options. Everybody might, well, I don't know. I mean, we had a number of priorities when we set out. We were quite clear about them, but they were time limited. The time has expired more or less on that original timing. We are back round with multiple things. We have a very small group of people who are interested, but they are very interested. They have a real use case. They really want to use it. So we have to somehow get some useful commentary out of this process, and we're expecting to come back with a proposition at the next session. So Zahid, do you want to quickly comment first? That's good.
Yes, this is my idiot on. I'm really sad that we are actually in ISCAR 1. Like after the design team meeting, we had some kind of ideas. Then option 3, option 4 popped up. We thought like in Dublin, we're done with this. But I'm sad like we're still on like asking the same question again and again. So I think my personal opinion would be like, we make a decision. A decision could be like, we don't make a decision. So, I mean, this is basically the working group has to come up with a decision. And what I would like to see, like, again, perhaps a small short-lived design team to actually decide on these things, because I think these meetings are very good for like detail, get the detailed view, but the nitty-gritty details that we're talking about, the open source thing, the interaction between the different boxes there, that needs more like dedicated discussion. I would like us to lock us in a room and only get out when you have a solution. That's not possible. So, but still, I think even if it takes like a bit more time, as we are already late, it might be a good idea to get those design team again, look into this as a solution thing, not like let's come up with, just pick whatever it is and come to the working group and say like, this is the decision. That perhaps the best way forward.
I don't have a better solution at this moment. I'm happy to take votes, but I'm not knowing what people actually need to have, and that kind of relates to those people who will be actually implementing. So this is complicated. I give two options of Zahed's thing. One is we form a design team a little bit rapid, and we come back on Wednesday at the next meeting with some sort of outcome or some sort of direction that you can do, or you do it longer term and you have more time. So, but this is useful, but it's not bounded in time. So it's not that useful to talk about and present here at the moment. So Magnus, while I'm talking, are you formulating a theory about whether you can come back with something useful by Wednesday, perhaps?
I'm uncertain if we can do something by Wednesday, especially with, I think, Michael not being here. It will complicate the discussion a bit. Try to find a slot then.
That's okay. But then I suggest you meet together and discuss, invite the chairs along, invite anyone else from this group who's interested, but form a design team where the interested bodies get together and come up with a conclusion. I don't think it's sensible to vote on these four options in this meeting.
Yeah, and I think we will have to decide very soon on if we start communicating with 3DPP again about what the status is, because I think a lot of time has gone, and I think we need to communicate back something of where we are. But
Martin do Google with two very dumb questions. How long does it actually take to do formal verification for something like this? Like, I mean, I know, depends on how hard people work on it, et cetera, but like, is it years? Is it like 2 months? Is it, what's happened? What's the real penalty?
Maybe a year. Depends on, do you know the formal verifier and do you know the protocol? You need to know all the nitty-picky details of and then you need to put that in your formal verifier and analyze this result. Around a year, I would say.
All right, thank you. And is that like okay, so stupid question number 2. What would 3GPP's attitude be to like something with provisional formal verification? Would they just like reject that?
I have no idea how 3DPP would react to anything. I would refer to the last 3DPP LS saying we prefer this solution and it's urgent.
Yeah, I think I echo that one. I mean, we don't know. We don't know like how they will do that, and that's basically their decision. Yeah. Our job is to see, like, as I said, like the not making a decision is also a decision here.
I understand. But I mean, like, they want it now and they want it to be secure. See, those things may be in tension, which is why I'm.
Yeah, they want it now. That part time has kind of elapsed. So
yeah.
they're basically, I mean, whether they're like waiting and dying, that's not also the case. But it's still like, this is like really critical information, right?
Understood.
So I mean, we need to. I think I agree with Magnus. Like, we need to come up with a really quick, and that's why I propose the design team really focused on this one this time. You guys come up with a solution that the working group basically will say we're fine with it.
All right. So my final dumb question is, not knowing anything about this market, are people actually the people who are actually going to sell the solution in 3GPP land, are they actually dependent on an open source implementation, or does everyone just do their own stack anyway?
Well, that depends, and also the demographic is like some of the vendors have own implementations, some of them actually have part of own implementation, part of open source. So it is blended. No, like I can tell about only my company. Like we try to depend on the open source thing.
Okay. It does
That's what-
materially matter that
it
Michael can
matters.
implement something.
Matters.
Okay, excellent.
Whether I can implement it open source or not, it really matters. Yes.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Is going to work on this type of things.
Can you speak into the mic, Tianji?
Oh yes, I can answer your question. How 3GPP may take the work here, because 3GPP based on 100% consensus. So basically, also they will depend on the stability and the maturity of the technology here. The thing is here, well, whatever we provide to 3GPP, they are going to look at this one. Is it like stable or something like it's not going to evolve too much, and also it's based on 100% consensus. Meaning, like from the Google, is I don't like it. Most likely, it's going to be hanging around there. Or like from us, MCC, so yeah, they say the ICTP is good, but we want to verify the security certification is more secure, is better than what it used to be, what now, and then let's hold. So we can raise our, normally we do not raise objection, but if one company raise objection, most likely it's going to be hanging around.
Okay. As an individual, like I mean, I certainly don't have a strong technical opinion about this. Certainly not with a Google hat on. Absolutely not with a Google hat on. But I guess my advice would be, yes, this formal verification thing seems like time consuming up front, but I feel like option 3, from what has been explained to me, might be hiding a lot of time and delay on the back end. That there's like all this complexity in trying to do an open source. There's doing this and having like kernel implementations try to interact with user space and so on, and changing on those APIs. It's and potentially, in 3GPP land, if they can't get 100% consensus because people are trying to avoid IPR, and I'm just speculating, and this is obviously not my field, but I'm saying there might be delay in both approaches, and that maybe the formal verification delay is not as large relatively. Throwing that out there as a possibility.
So, I mean, one comment there. I mean, we have option 3 implemented, and it didn't take particularly much work for us, but then we have a user land stack, so we didn't have to consider additional APIs, etc. So,
okay, that's a good data point. Thank you.
Yeah, John Eriksson. Yes, commenting on the 3GPP was, of course, if there's, it was already some points. I would point to the time aspects. I'm not sure if we come with something in a few years that 3GPP is interested at all anymore. 3GPP has already started to work on 6G. 6G requirement have been a topic for, I think, over a year. 3GPP will soon start with 6G stage 2 architecture, and then in maybe 2 years they will start the actual specifications. So 6G train is already rolling. Coming in a few years, we want this update to 5G. Very uncertain how that will be.
Just to reflect to that one, like I agree, I hear you, John, but 6G might not even have an SCTP in it. So
Okay, guys, we're not anticipating more about what 3GPP will or will not do or will not do, but we do have time for a quick poll, and we'd like to try that.
Okay, I'm going to ask 2 questions just to get a sense of the room and see, A, how many people can actually form an opinion, and B, like if it turns out there's more consensus than we think. So the first thing I'm going to ask is, like, do you think it should be 3 or 4 or something else? So if you like hate 3 and 4, then answer no. And I'm going to start it now. And then the second question, as you might imagine, is choosing between option 3 and option 4.
So please, if you want yes, say yes. If you want no, say no. If you believe no opinion, then that's another button you can press. If you don't want to participate, don't press any buttons. Does anyone need more time? Just 1 minute, and then we're going. And then we're going to launch the next poll.
Closing in 3, 2, 1. Okay, let the record show that 9 people think we should do. We should pick one of the two, and one says something else. Would would Mr. Something Else or Mrs. Something Else like to go to the mic and express their position? Is that Charles that's in the line? Can you let me clear people out of the queue.
This is Charles, but no, I wasn't the one, but I almost was, because I feel like I don't have a good enough understanding why 2 is off the table. So between 2 and 4, I don't know if someone can just like in a quick sentence tell me is 2, yeah, like option 2 versus option 4.
Yeah, this is exactly the reason that I didn't want to have any pool in this call. This should not be done. So just like I'm saying, I don't think like we can decide anything. Just like running some pool doesn't make any sense if we cannot decide anything.
Okay, that's pretty clear instruction from the director. So I will not ask a second question. I think the chairs, I think the 3 of us chairs will work to like identify maybe a question we can ask on Wednesday. I really, I mean, you're going to keep dealing with this until we decide something. So I would really strongly encourage people to maybe read up on this a little bit, look at the slides, understand them, understand the trade-offs. Magnus is around, Michael's available, although he's in a different time zone. And let's come back to this on Wednesday and try to formulate a question that allows us to move forward. I don't know what that question will be yet, but try to educate yourselves on this. I think we just need, and you guys are all good technologists, even though you may not be in this particular thing. And I think just having the sense of the group is very helpful on what to value and what not. Thanks.
Okay, and there will be, there's no time left in this meeting. There will be 5 minutes only at the start of the next session. So this will just go on for 5 minutes with whatever question emerges. So talk to us to figure out what that might be. Come along to the next session because we've got a lot of 10-minute drafts and we would like you to look at those and comment on them. So read them ahead of time. That's going to be the end of this meeting. I don't think we can take more. We're out of time. I'm sorry.
Thanks to our scribes, Magnus and Greg, and we'll see you on Wednesday. So what was confusing about my next header answer?
That's not available in Go.
Ah, that's the problem. Okay.
You can cross-compile for all the platforms, and the next area only works if you're building on the platform you're running it on.
I see.
That's
Okay,
why
there
you
you
need
go.
to hard code. I mean, they have like long lists of constants for all the different platforms they are building for.